So the Bulls season has concluded in disappointing fashion, finishing the season below 500, 10th in the Eastern Conference, and missing the playoffs after losing in the second game of the play-in. And with the end of the season comes the end of season press conferences and exit interviews with the players. And while I'll touch briefly on the comments from some of the players and their exit interviews in this video, I wanted to focus on the press conference from Arturas Karnisovas and Billy Donovan that happened over the weekend. Key takeaways, what I liked and didn't like, and what it means for the Bulls going forward into the offseason. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Before I get into this video, of course, a big shout out to the sponsor of the channel, So Rare, which I'm super excited to tell you guys about their platform, especially considering it is free to join. It's super fun, and you get to win prizes, collect digital cards and assets in the form of NFTs, unlike most sporting apps. They're different in that it's actually a fantasy gaming marketplace. There's no gambling or betting of any kind. The site enables you to play where users own their players forever. Think of it like you're a GM creating your own dynasty, and you compete weekly in fantasy competitions for great prizes. Users are owners and general managers of their team, making trades, buying and selling players, etc. And unlike other gaming sites, as I mentioned, there's no betting. It doesn't cost you anything to play. You can start for free, and I've created my own private league where you can compete and play against each other for prizes and offers. So check it out if you're interested. Join my private league. Link to that is in the description. We've got some great people in there, and thanks again to So Rare for sponsoring this video. Now, I've seen a lot of people getting pretty heated by the comments from AK coming out of the end of season press conference, and rightfully so. I mean, really, the whole 25 plus minutes or so was mainly dominated by Arturas. You really didn't hear much from Billy Donovan aside from answering a few questions. The whole thing was very uninspiring, frustrating, and quite frankly, a bit of a disaster. At the same time, you kind of had to expect that that was going to be the case given how horribly the season has gone and how throughout the year, whenever we did hear from AK, it was just more of the same lip service. Continuity, we like the guys we have, we've seen improvements, yada yada yada. And I'll talk about some of the things for me that personally were very cringe and hard to hear and borderline delusional if they truly believe some of the remarks that they made. But what I will say, and I tweeted about this shortly after the presser, this wasn't as bad of a press conference over what we heard after the trade deadline when the Bulls made absolutely no moves in a season in which it was pretty clear that late in the year this team wasn't going to work. And in that conference, you just heard this nonsense of we felt this group of guys give us the best chance to win and finish out the last 28 games. During that conference, there was no accountability for the bad season to date. There was no acknowledgement of how poorly constructed the roster was. You even had AK downplaying some of the severe issues on the roster as it related to three-point shooting, toughness, lack of size, and really doubling down on every decision they had made to date. Now again, not saying this press conference was good by any stretch of the imagination, but what I did appreciate was that there was some level of accountability. There was genuine disappointment, and that they have to be better, that the fans deserve better, the organization deserves better, and the fact that they said that they were going to be taking a look at everything. I mean, really, you talk about continuity, that was the key word that was used in so many prior press conferences. And this one, it was, we're going to be taking a look at everything. Arturas Karnisovas repeated that over and over. Of course, at the same time, they also continued to double down on their decisions at the trade deadline and obviously this past offseason, and did a fair amount of patting themselves on the back for their improved play post All-Star break. And really, I mean, when you compare it to last season where the Bulls finished the season 7-15 post All-Star break compared to it this year going 14-9 after the break, yeah, it's an improvement. But it's also not something to get excited about and claim that this was some kind of an accomplishment. And what concerned me was when AK mentioned because of this improved play, he felt they were on the right path and what they needed to do to win. Like, come on now. You can't sit there and say with a straight face that this team is heading on the right path simply because they played a little better basketball after the All-Star break. Like, yes, I said in multiple post-game videos after the break, there was something about this team that was different. They were finally playing with a newfound energy, a sense of urgency, playing with much better pace, much more aggression in getting the basket, playing with better ball movement. You can call it the Pat Bev effect or just the fact that Lavine started playing considerably better. But yes, as a team, they look better than what they did to start the season. But by no means does it take away from the fact that this roster isn't it. They are not good enough to contend. They're not even good enough to make the playoffs. And to have your executives say they're on the right path because of marginally improved play is very concerning. Another piece that I thought was telling when asked about whether they would consider a full-blown rebuild, I believe it was Sam Smith who asked that question, and point blank, AK said, "It's not on our minds," citing that the moment we changed our minds in the 2021 season to focus on winning and trying to build a sustainable program, further adding that what they're focused on is how to help this group and how they can improve from this year. So while yes, the word continuity was never used, which I think was smart because all of us fans probably would have lost our minds, but stating that a full rebuild isn't in their minds and how the focus is to keep winning and how they can help improve the current group that they have is pretty close to just saying we prefer continuity. Now, I'm not saying the Bulls should do a full-blown rebuild, as I know a lot of fans would like to see, but it certainly should not be out of the question or off the table. Like, that should most certainly be an option, especially when you consider the fact that the Bulls, based on their cap situation, the free agents they have coming up, and the money they have locked in, there isn't much in the way for them to make meaningful moves this offseason aside from actually making a big trade, such as trading either DeMar DeRozan or Zach Lavine or even both, which would mean a full-blown rebuild. And I'll talk about the Bulls' cap sheet and impending free agency and why it's going to be incredibly challenging for them to make any meaningful moves outside of just tearing everything down. I'll do that in a separate video, but in short, a lot of it has to do with the fact that we all know the Bulls aren't going to be paying the luxury tax, which severely limits them in how they approach this offseason to get creative in actually improving this roster. Now, kind of sticking on that topic of keeping the current group, cap sheet, free agents, and it kind of just further leads to the scratching your head if these guys are really going to be taking a look at everything or they're just going to be keeping the same crew and going with the mindset of, well, they finished the season strong, I think we're on the right path. Again, a direct quote from AK. But when asked about the Bulls' upcoming free agents, guys like Vuce, who is going to be unrestricted, Coby White, Ayo, who are both going to be restricted, all of these guys, AK said he wants to keep around. Now, granted, it's not like he's going to bluntly tell the media we're not interested in keeping so-and-so on the team. Naturally, he's going to give the canned PR response that they want to re-sign their free agents. But AK was actually pretty adamant about wanting to re-sign both Vucevic and Coby White. He also said he wanted to keep Ayo, and that he sees a future for him and hopes that it is in Chicago, but it wasn't with the same level of enthusiasm as he was when asked about Vucevic or Coby. And like, if AK wants to keep all these guys who are going to be free agents, you're basically talking about the front office running things back. Again, it doesn't mean that they can't change their minds or, you know, say something to the media and have a completely different approach when it comes to their overall strategy behind the scenes. And obviously, things can change based on how contract negotiations go. Maybe Vuce demands too much money, or he gets an offer that is just too good to pass up from another team. I find it unlikely, considering there aren't a lot of teams with cap space and teams that are in need of a starting center. Or say Coby White gets a big offer and the Bulls can't afford to match because it puts them into the luxury tax. Like, yes, a lot of these things can change, but based on what we know of Arturas Karnisovas and how he's been doubling down on this roster that he has constructed and the amount of draft capital investment he has put into it, I wouldn't be surprised if he truly believes what he said in wanting to keep all of their free agents and just run it back with some minor tweaks. Now, one piece that I did appreciate from his remarks was the fact that he finally emphasized the Bulls' shooting woes, saying they finished dead last in three-point rate, attempts, and threes made, stating it will be a priority for us to change the shooting profile of this team, adding that it's very difficult for us to go into every game with such a deficit and that it's hard to get out of said deficit when you don't have three-point shooting. And I say I appreciate him actually acknowledging this because he certainly ducked the issue when asked about it after the trade deadline, saying that while yes, we're not shooting threes at a high volume, we're still making them, as if it was almost a non-issue in today's NBA that is predicated on three-point shooting. So the fact that he was pretty emphatic in their need to address their lack of three-point shooting was good. For me, it's more about can they actually get creative enough to surround guys like Zach and DeMar with quality shooters. Another takeaway as it relates to Lonzo Ball, and I actually thought this was interesting, was when he was asked whether they would apply for the disabled player exception for Lonzo, given he's likely going to miss most, if not all, of next season. He said he would not comment on that, which leads me to believe that something like that is on the table. Otherwise, he would have just shot that down entirely. He did say he has confidence that he's going to be coming back, but obviously the timeline is still unclear. My guess is they're going to assess how he progresses throughout the season, and if there is any indication it's unlikely he'll be able to return, and I mean return as in career ending, they'll make a decision on whether they'll use that disabled player exception to get Lonzo's salary off the books. Lonzo will still get his money, but that salary would no longer be on the cap sheet, which is actually pretty big. You're talking about $20 million there. He also did double down, saying that He didn't have any regrets for not addressing the starting point guard role to replace Lonzo because he didn't have enough clarity at that time going into the season. The thought was that he would eventually come back and play. And I honestly can't really fault the front office for that. I mean, to think that Lonzo was going to miss the entire season during the offseason last year seems so unlikely at that time. That why would you try and address your need for a point guard when you expected Lonzo to be coming back? But now the Bulls have to find a starting point guard because Io didn't cut it. Pat Bev isn't a starting point guard in the NBA. Is Coby White that guy? Seems crazy to say, especially after all the viewpoints we had on him last season, but it's why I think they will prioritize keeping Coby. Anyway, all in all, like I said, pretty uninspiring press conference. For fans, it makes you question, does this guy really know what he's doing? Does he actually have a plan, or is he kind of just winging it as he goes? Granted, AK is not a big media guy, doesn't talk to the media often. When he actually does, it's very short and to the point in terms of his answers. Obviously, in a press conference coming off a bad season, what else are you really going to say? Especially when a lot of things are still up in the air as it relates to guys with player options on their contracts, restricted and unrestricted free agents. Did the Bulls get a miracle and actually hit on the draft lottery and actually keep their pick? That would certainly change things. And yes, I also acknowledge that a lot of times, whether fans or reporters, we tend to pick apart or overly dissect comments and remarks made in a press conference, so much so to the point where it can lead to misinterpretation of what was said or taking it out of context. So I do think it's important to acknowledge that. Even myself, I'm probably overreacting to certain comments and taking them out of context when really the intention of what was truly said might have been different. But for the most part, I think most will agree that the path forward and future of this team is a little bleak, especially after the comments that were made in this press conference from the Bulls front office. Wow, I didn't even get to some of the exit interviews from the players. I'll likely have to save that for a different day. But guys, let me know what you thought of AK's comments during the presser. Let me know down below. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.